Okay, let's do number 3 and 4 together. This says when we're looking at the difference between standard and actual costs. So we're really talking about what's going on at actual activity. So we want to understand what the standard costs are and the difference, if you like, the variance really ultimately between what's going on between the standards and the actuals, if you like. And this allows management to focus on operations, and ultimately, therefore, the answer here is variance analysis, because variance is of, well, I guess that's what budgeting is fundamentally about: comparing budgeted with actual based on actual activity, right? This is on inputs, by the way. We focus on inputs, so materials, labor, that sort of thing, variable overheads, that kind of thing. Right, so I think this is a good question because it allows me kind of show you again how this builds up. Now, materials, let's focus on materials first. So now if you remember, when we talked about, when we say, oh, there's an actual material overall material variance, cost variance, right? But we say that variance can be broken up into two. So that variance can be broken up into a price variance and a v- usage variance. I was going to say volume there. And so we're told here that, because you see this figure here, this figure here is made up of a price variance and a usage variance. And you see the price variance here, we're told, is 500 favorable, and the usage variance here is 750 adverse. So the actual overall variance, what happened if you here was that we had an overall variance, we must have had an overall variance, adverse variance of 250, right? And then that was broken up. We focused just on price in terms of the price of the raw materials, just focusing on the price of the kilograms that we bought in. And here we focus purely just on the usage, if you like. So that's our overall cost variance for materials, just broken up into two. Now, we could go ahead and try and investigate this 750 further, and especially when we're talking about chemicals. And when then we went on and studied, which is again, please, you have to go back and watch those videos on mix and yield. I mean, if you haven't seen it in a long time, you'd have to go back and review it and look at it. And we said that this could, and now we kind of know the answer here already. And this is really broken up. This 750. I mean, this is where I'm going. This is just a breakdown. So this usage variance is really made up of a mix variance and a yield variance. I mean, it's just confirming answers. So the mix variance here is 1000 adverse on further investigation, and I have a favorable variance here of 250 favorable. So really this 750 is made up of this 1000 and this 250. So the variance I'm actually interested in really ultimately is this. This is the 250 here for materials. This is just how it's broken down, and we spent time investigating that. Now, the labor rate variance, which is a completely different resource here, is that I have um, a labor variance again, and broken into two parts, and I have a labor rate variance of 250 favorable and an efficiency variance of 300 adverse. So the actual variance itself overall is a £50 adverse variance, right? So that's kind of, so this is the figure I'm interested in. So overall, I have an overall adverse variance of 250 as far as materials are concerned. This is what when we talk about variances from from the standard to actual, and a £50 adverse. So these are both negative variances. So it says if actual was 10,000, so I mean that's what my standard is. I'm going to call it X, and this is my actual 10,000. So I expected to spend a certain amount, but I spent 250 too much on materials, and I spent £50 too much, which is why it's adverse, and I arrived at 110,000 pounds. So the question is, what was my starting point, if you like? So technically, this is X plus 300, which is equal to 10,000. So my starting point is 9,700. I think it's important to make sure you're comfortable again with that we have a cost variance, but that's really made up of a price variance and a usage variance. By watching those videos again, please, you will come back to a clearer understanding of this. Cool, great stuff.